Welcome, everybody, to another Pathfinder episode. My name is Tommy Soares. I'm Assistant Director of the Purdue Institute of Inflammation, Immunology and Infectious Disease. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming Ricardo Arias, Manager of Dairy Specialty Products, Technical Services at United Animal Health, right here in Noblesville, Indiana. Welcome, Ricardo. Thank you so much for joining us. I should really say, Dr. Arias, thank you so much for being on the program. You know, I've wanted to connect with you for some time because I can see from your LinkedIn profile that you've had quite a walkabout from your journey to get to Indiana. And I think it would be great for everybody that is listening and watching to hear a little bit about that. So thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. I think this is one of the few instances in the U.S. where somebody pronounces my name in the correct way. So I appreciate that.
Well, good. I have a very good friend, and his brother's name is Ricardo Arias.
There you go. You had to ruin
Ricardo,
it.
yeah, that's right. His name is Ricardo Arias. So thank you. Really, it's so good. We know you're not a native from Indiana, and so maybe you can take us back to your early beginnings in education, and or maybe as back as your journey as you want to take us, and tell us how you got here and how you got to do what you do today.
I think I'm gonna take you all the way back because some people might appreciate it. So I consider myself Honduran, but I was born in Brazil. So my parents are both from Honduras, but my mom got a scholarship when she was ready to go to college to study dentistry or odontology in Brazil, and she had just started dating my dad, and he fell head over heels for her. So he ended up a year later going on a scholarship as well, but to animal science career, zootecnia in Brazil. What they didn't know is, back then there was no internet, you didn't know anything about the other continents. So they ended up being a 24-hour drive in bus away from each other. So, but eventually, like a year after that, my dad moved to a closer university. But long story short, they got married there. I was born there. I was a year and a half old when they graduated and went back to Honduras. Um, so I consider myself Honduran. Never spoke Portuguese. They never bothered to teach me, and I had to learn it later in life when I met my wife, who is from Brazil, and that you have interviewed here too, Samantha. But that's how I ended up learning Portuguese finally.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's so great.
I think it's pretty crazy. The craziest part, though, from that story is that my wife, who I met in Laramie, Wyoming, when I was doing my PhD, graduated in the same ballroom in the same university that my mom did
Oh
in Brazil.
wow. Oh
Yeah.
wow.
And for those of you who don't have an idea of how big Brazil is, it's just as big as the continental U.S. if you take Alaska out. So it's a pretty big coincidence, I think.
Absolutely.
But anyway, so I started all my education in Honduras, including my undergrad. So I went to Escuela Agrícola Panamericana, is what it was called back then. I think now it's Universidad de Zamorano, Zamorano University. There's tons of people from Purdue. There's a long history of exchanges and exchange of students and coursework and stuff with Purdue and Zamorano, as well as with other universities in the U.S. But that's where I started. I studied dairy science, basically in Zamorano. If you, for those of you who don't know about it, it's Cal Poly will be the most similar, I think, system. So it's a boarding school to start with. So you live there. It's 4 years. There's not a lot of flexibility in the program. So you're either follow along or you get left behind, and then you have to come back the next year. You get a couple opportunities to come back that way. But they have a very strict discipline system as well. Obviously, having that many students, I think there's 1,200 students in the university in the campus, but it's just a huge farm. So you have everything and anything that it's ag-related in one place. You have forestry, you have vegetables, extensive crops, dairy, beef, swine, and for everything you have pretty much the latest in technology, but on a smaller scale. The dairy farm was, I think, 120 cows when I was there. The swine farm had, I don't know, 500 sows, maybe even less than that when I was there. So you get to experience a little bit of every production system. The first 2 years, you rotate through all that. Half of the day you work basically on those systems. The systems are maintained by the students who are the labor. And then the other half of the day is the core work. So the first 2 years you get to experience everything, and the last 2 years you kind of specialize in whatever area you want. And I went for dairy. That's where I started. So I did dairy nutrition basically. After I was done with that, I've always wanted to come to the States to get a master's or a PhD. You always hear stories, about people that came and continue their education outside of your country. And the US was back then, and I think still is, kind of the number one candidate for anybody that's aspiring for higher education outside of the US. And I started to get a little bit of the feeling. I didn't know English. Like my dad really made a big effort for me to learn English, but I never really took upon it. I like the music, I like the movies, the TV and everything. That's kind of how we all get started in Latin America, right? But I was never fluent. I took a little bit of grammar with him from an American lady that lived in my hometown in Honduras that gave private classes. But I was never really good. So I came for an internship in my senior year in Zamorano for 3 months. I went to the University of Florida and worked at the university's dairy for 3 months there. I did everything from milking to feeding. I was pretty much cheap labor back then, but I was also able to carry a trial with heifers that helped me with my thesis for my graduation. So it was a great experience. It was my first experience kind of in the US. Previous to that, I had come to visit, that was in 2003. Previous to that, I had come to visit some family in 95 when I was still in high school. And I remember I had two, I still have them obviously, two cousins that were my age, females, that were beautiful. And I just couldn't communicate with them. So it wasn't until after I came back from that experience that I took it upon myself to learn English a little better and be able to communicate. But even when I came for my internship, I basically spoke. I was translating everything, in my mind and trying to translate what I wanted to say from Spanish to English. And this just wasn't enough time, and it was mostly signs and
Yes,
a lot of nodding.
yes.
And I think we all go through that at the beginning. It's hard to get your brain to think in English, right? And process words in a different language.
But Ricardo, you knew well the operation at the farm. You knew well what you were doing there already. So there wasn't too much talking that you had to do to know exactly what needed to be done in the farm. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I had the experience already from Zamorano, and I
Yeah.
had the discipline, which is, I think, one of the biggest things that people that graduate from Zamorano have on their favor. When you're that young, if you haven't had that type of discipline imposed of getting up in the morning, at a certain time and doing chores and pulling your homework out and all that and following instructions, and be respectful of people in higher positions. If you don't experience it at home and nobody teaches you that, I see less and less of that, right, on the young generation. So I had that going for me, and it was a great experience. So after that, I went back to Honduras. I worked on an extension program with my mentor, who is Isidro Matamoros. He's a physiologist, a reproductive physiologist from Honduras, that still teaches there and does research there. Still works for the university, and he has managed an array of projects. But when I went back, my intention was to apply for a longer internship here in the US. And I had everything lined up to come back to the same dairy for the university. And my idea was, that's going to be my end. And I'm going to do my master's at the University of Florida. And I'm going to be a Gator, and it's going to be great. So I go back to Honduras, and they cut their budget.
Oh no.
So there's no spot for me to come back to. And I started working on this extension project, which was great. It was a great experience. Did that for about 8 months. And then I finally found a different farm in northern Florida, in a little town called Greenville, which is really close to the border with Georgia. And I did 12 months there. That's where I learned how to artificially inseminate cows, how to diagnose diseases, how to treat cows, how to use management softwares. Back then, this was still DOS based or DOS based softwares. So it's a little different from what we have now. But that's what really got me started. And English wise, didn't help me very much because the manager was from Brazil, and the other vet that was kind of, shadowing was also from Brazil. And neither of us was very good with English, so we did the best we could, but there wasn't much that we were going to learn from each other in terms of language.
Yes.
So, but I learned a lot about dairy and a lot about cow health and reproduction when I was there. After that, I went back to Honduras, and I realized during that stint of internship that I needed to do a GRE. I needed to do a TOEFL, right? I had no idea. I learned that I needed to find a professor that was willing to sponsor me and had an assistantship and money for research. So I went back with the intention to get all that done, because working at a dairy for 14, 16 days, 16 hours a day doesn't really leave you enough time for that.
Yeah.
So I went back home and started working on all that. And while I did that, I managed the beef herd of the university that back then was about 100, 150 mama cows, purebred Brahmans, registered Brahman herd. I did everything, the educational part with the students, the learning by doing that we call it. So I will take all the groups that rotated from there and teach them how to do everything basically with the herd.
Yeah.
We did silage management, crop management, and also a great experience for me. But in that time, I did my TOEFL, I passed my GRE. I had a professor identified at the University of Florida that had actually brought some students to Zamorano to do like a tropical agricultural coursework. And she was going to be my in into my master's. When I was I was applying already when she got a job offer from Purdue. So she kind of, asked me to decide, hey, do you want to stay here in Florida and you can work with somebody else, or do you want to go to Purdue with me and be part of my starting package? I'm like, I don't know, Purdue, Florida. It was a tough decision, but I went with Purdue, and I'm glad I did. My master's, didn't turn out to be the best mentor at the end, but I found professors from the animal science department, because I went to agronomy department initially.
Okay.
And I found really good support on the animal science side with Ron Lemonager. I don't know if you've heard of him. Scott Lake was working at the animal science department at that time too in beef nutrition. So I did all my coursework, most of my coursework on the animal science side, all of my research on the animal science side. I did experiments with this was 2007, 2008. So there was an ethanol boom. There was a lot of DDGs. We didn't know what to do with them. So a lot of my research was focused on how to preserve wet distillers grains, mix them up with silage, what properties that had, how feasible that was. I had metabolic rooms 4 cannulated steers where I took samples, every couple hours of urine, feces, blood. And it was very intense, but it was excellent. I had a hammock in the metabolic room where I took my naps, and it was perfect.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I
That's
made
so
a I
good.
made a lot of friends at Purdue, but I guess an experience standpoint as an international student, I could have done better to make more friends that were American. I felt comfortable in my little bubble of Latinos. So most of my friends were also from Zamorano that were in different departments, or kids from other countries that also spoke Spanish. All our parties were Latin music. So I didn't really I should have made an effort to look for uh to diversify a little bit more my friendships there, but I still made really good friends from the department that we did research with or took classes with. But after that, Scott Lake, the guy that was in my committee at Purdue, had moved to Wyoming because he was from uh, close to Reno, is where his family grew up, and he grew up ranching with his dad, and he's a Mormon, so he had 4 kids, and he always wanted to go back to the West and raise his kids in that type of culture, rodeo, cattle shows, just the West is a different beast from the Midwest. So he had gone back about a year before I graduated from my master's, and right at the time that I was applying for jobs, when I was done with my master's, I got a text message from him asking if I was still looking to do a PhD. And at that point, I decided that I was not going to do a PhD. The PhDs were for crazy people, and I wasn't crazy, so I was not going to do that. And I was looking for jobs, but I had started going to Wyoming while I was at Purdue. We were breeding heifers, doing some trials with synchronization programs with Scott and some other colleagues. And I fell in love with the country. I fell in love with the people. So I decided that if I was going to do a PhD, I was not going to have a better opportunity than that. And no matter what happened, I was going to enjoy it. So that's what I ended up doing. I went to Wyoming in 2010. I was there till 2014, and I did my research on uh, reproductive physiology, effects of nutrition on oocyte quality and embryo transfer, post AI nutrition of beef heifers. So it was really interesting. It wasn't as intense as my research in my master's, but it was a really cool experience as well. And some of the best friends I made are still in Wyoming. So I didn't have an option there. I did have my little Hispanic group there, but from the moment I went to Wyoming, I told myself, I'm not gonna say no to anybody. If anybody invites me to a party, to a bar, I'm gonna go. If anybody invites me to participate in a trial, or help them taking sample, I'm gonna do it. So I had a much more open mindset than when I went to Purdue. When I was a little scared that I didn't speak English very well and all that. So it was a good experience for me.
That's awesome. That's
Yeah.
that's incredible. And so from Wyoming, how did you get to United Animal Health and back to Indiana?
So back to Zamorano. One of the guys that I did that that short stint on extension before I did my internship, he was 2 or 3 years older than me, so he was graduating the year that I went into Zamorano. So we didn't really know each other then, but we got to know very well. We got to know each other very well. Joel Vasquez is his name. He graduated from the University of Illinois with his master's in nutrition. Um, and we became really good friends when we were in that extension project in Honduras back when. He started after I did my master's, but right after his master's, instead of going for a PhD, he came to work for United. And he was very successful. At that time, United was still doing nutrition on the dairy side. We're not doing that anymore. We're only doing specialty products. But he was super successful on the nutrition side, and they were looking to add another consultant. and he kind of recommended me to his boss. And at first, I interviewed with him, and there was really nothing that fitted for me. And like 2 weeks later, he called me back and he's like, "Yeah, we're splitting this territory. We want you for it. Are you interested?" And I started my career here as a I was hired for a nutrition consultant spot, but I wasn't even done with my training when they switched me to technical support, and that's what I've been doing most of the time. Yeah, until 2020 when we moved to Sheridan. I was in Michigan back then, so the first 5 years with United, I was in Michigan doing tech support, and then the last 3 years I've been doing still some of the technical support, but a little bit of research as well. We kind of team up with Sam to do some of the stuff, and we have tons of resources from the other species as well, and platforms that we use. So
it's been wonderful from meeting Samantha Fenster-Cipher, from meeting Hector Ramirez last time too, and from meeting you. I think I'm getting a better picture of what United Animal Health is doing, but there is so much still there because I need to discover more with you. There's some good tidbits there that I want to get to, but let me take you back if we can.
Yep.
And when I interviewed Hector, I also felt like there was this experience, hands-on applied experience at Zamorano that you had that many people don't realize how special that is to embark you in a direction. And for Hector, it was chickens. Right?
And bull riding.
And bull, and
was
bull
really
riding.
good.
Is that right?
Yeah. He didn't tell you that?
No, he didn't. We didn't
Oh,
get to
man.
that part of the interview, and I'm gonna have to maybe call him up and hear about the bull riding. But tell us a little bit about that experience where, like, you're in a farm and
Yeah.
and this is your university education. What is that like? And you said, okay, so in the morning you're at the farm, and then you're doing school in the afternoon. You're taking courses and classes.
Depends on what rotation you are, and what semester. They match the semester with some of the rotations, but sometimes you're working in the morning, sometimes you're working in the afternoon, and having class on the opposite. Um, so when you're in the dairy, for example, you spend I think I spent a month rotating on through dairy, where you do a little bit of everything: feeding, milking,
Yeah.
treating, everything. But you got to get up at 3:30 in the morning, be there at 4 for the milking, right? The morning milking. So yeah, it was, how old are we when we go into that? 16, 17? All you know is the comfort of your home. And you go to this place and they room you with somebody that from a different country that you've never met. And there's a little bit of hazing involved, especially back then. There was a little bit of hazing involved, so it was tough. It was tough. I think we started with 140 in my class, and we graduated 80.
Wow.
So yeah, it was. I don't know anymore how intense it is. I'm sure the coursework and the field work is still, as intense. But I don't think there's a lot of the hazing anymore that kind of got in the way of some of the fun.
Yeah.
For some people, for me, it was a good way to distract me from missing my parents, missing home, missing the food that I got cooked at home and all that, my friends, my freedom. But yeah, it's a tough system.
Yeah.
It kind of makes you grow up a lot faster than probably if you go to, a public university where you have all the freedom in the world and you can get drunk on a Monday, and there's no alcohol. You got to earn your weekends if you want to get out. You got to have a signed permit to get out. if you accumulate so many demeanors because you didn't make your bed in the morning, or because you didn't make it on time to a class, or you missed class, or you made it late to work, you accumulate all these points, let's say, kind of like in your license.
Yeah.
And if you accumulate so many in a semester, you can't get out the next. If you accumulate so many in a year, you're out.
That's
So
intense.
you leave either by failing class or accumulating, or lacking the discipline. And then you have, like I said, you have one chance for each. So you can come back twice, but for different reasons. So there's a lot of we call them doctors. The guys that come back, they're doctors because they spend more time in school than we have.
Yeah.
So a lot of the guys that will haste you on the freshman year wouldn't make it on their sophomore year. So they will come back as sophomores again when you were a sophomore. They had a rough time.
Oh, yeah. I can imagine.
But it was really cool because it just now is this community that it's
Yeah.
forever. I can bump into Zamorano that graduated in 72. I graduated in 2003. And there's this bond that united us that we've never met, but we know what the other one went through, and it's really cool. It helps not only on the personal side, but also on the professional side. There's a lot of Zamoranos that are, have really good jobs and work with all kinds of companies. So anything you want to do, you're likely to find somebody that knows about the school or
but that sense of discipline, when you described it, you spoke about it fondly. You spoke about it like you realize now how good it was to help you in what you're doing now and everything that you.
I think in my case was a little unfair because I already had that from my house. My dad and my mom, I think, did a great job raising me and my sister. So we already had that. We were respectful. We did what we were told. We did our homework in time. We studied for our tests. So we made our beds in the morning. So maybe not at home, but it wasn't hard getting used to that once I went to Zamorano.
Yeah.
And some other people don't have that structure in their houses. There's people from all walks in the world there. So there's people that don't have money to buy shoes, when they're growing up, that go with full scholarships from the government, from Ecuador, from Honduras. There's people that their family own enterprises, and have 5 farms, or money people that paid the whole ride and doesn't tickle them. But you get there, and they throw away your clothes, they put you in a uniform, everybody's wearing the same shoes. Not anymore, but back then everybody wore the same shoes, the same belt, the same underwear. So they kind of put you on the same playing field. And it helps both sides, just equalize nobody's looking down on anybody anymore.
Wow.
So I've always been middle class, so I was always in the middle. I always had, discipline. It was still tough, but it wasn't as tough for me as it was for some of my colleagues, especially the ones that didn't make it.
Yeah.
No, and it's not for everybody.
No, I can imagine. It sounds pretty strict and regimented. But so then you got this opportunity to go to Florida, and you didn't have to learn any English at all because you were submerged with Brazilians and Latin Americans, and that was it.
It was great when I hit Purdue. One of my first classes was soil physics. I was in probation on my second semester. To summarize it for you, I had no clue what the professor was saying. I was translating in my head, typing in Spanish, and then trying to study in Spanish, but translating to English in the exam. So I did terrible my first semester. I took stats, I took soil physics, and I think I took a forage class. That was the only one I did okay at, but it was rough. At Purdue, I was still not good. But after about 2 or 3 months, I started to gain traction, kind of start switching that mindset of translating to just thinking in English. And that's what really made a difference for me.
So, but what were the techniques that you used to get you there? Was there anything that accelerated your path to get to start thinking in English?
I think I was just stubborn at the beginning, you know. I don't know. Nobody tells you what's the best way to go about it. So I thought, you know, because Spanish was my native language, that it would be easier for me to learn everything that was uh, taught in class if I wrote it down in Spanish. And I quickly realized that was not the case. So I don't know. I don't think it's something that you intentionally do. It's just your brain, and you know,
Yeah,
different people take different time to get there,
yeah.
I think. But eventually your brain gets into a different gear and you start thinking in a different language. And yeah, I don't know if there's, I don't think I did it on purpose, you know. I just forced myself to.
And if you were to recommend to other Spanish speakers or even other non-English speakers, would you recommend that they take an English class or technical writing class, or like what would you do now differently that you would if you had the chance to do it all over again?
So I'm trying to put myself, because if I try to think what I would do now, it's really easy. You know what you need, and obviously I would I pay for a class where that will make me bilingual. That will make my life a lot easier. But
Yeah,
when you're, you know, 20, you don't have that mentality.
yeah,
I'm just gonna wing it and it's gonna work out. You have to be very self-driven, and there's a lot of people that are. Don't get me wrong, but I wasn't that way. So I was gonna wing it and I was gonna make it through no matter what. I think what helped me the most was just the Americanized culture that we have in Honduras, at least, and some parts of Latin America, where all our shows are from the US with caption. You know, all the movies are in English with caption. All the music that we listen to is in English. So my brain had made those exercises already. I knew what the words meant. You know, I knew how to put words together into a sentence and have a conversation. I just hadn't practiced
I
how to
see.
process it
Yeah.
and put it all together. I think and I've heard this from for every language and from many people. The best way is just to immerse yourself in it. You can take all the classes you want, but you're not gonna get really good at it until you're living and you have no other option, right?
That's
So
right.
as a new student, I think the only thing I would have done differently if I were to go back in time is to try to make more friends that were Americans. You know, try to go out, try to partner in my class groups with Americans, and just submerge myself until I was good enough.
Yeah.
And that was something that, for example, worked really well with Sam. When Samantha came to Wyoming, it was the same thing. You know, she knew all the songs in English. Uh, she thought she knew English. She knew the meaning of the words, but she couldn't put a sentence together to save her life.
Yeah.
So instead of me speaking Spanish to her and her speaking Portuguese to me, I kept speaking English to her for the first 2 years
Wow.
that I met her, until she was comfortable with it and that I felt that she was good enough that she could, you know,
Yeah.
that she could manage herself.
Yeah.
And then as a relationship evolved into a couple, we felt like it was easier for us to express our feelings in our own language.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now at home I speak Spanish and she speaks Portuguese.
Wow.
And we have two kids that are very confused.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But it
They're
works for
very,
us, you know.
that I've always said that too. I'm culturally confused. But that makes for wonderful, wonderful dinners, I'm sure, and dinner conversations. But Ricardo, tell us a little bit now, you know, you really focused your entire career in this particular field. And I think
Yeah.
it continually opened up doors for you because you were such a specialist and you were so good at the applied part in the farm that people would like recommend, and like people would call you up and say, come to Wyoming, let's go do a PhD, and have that experience like that, and then come to Michigan. There's this opportunity here. It seems like you opened up so many doors by combining that discipline with a lot of the specialty that you start gaining. Tell us about, okay, so the master's degree at Purdue in animal science, that you compared that to your PhD experience at Wyoming, and you said that the master's degree was much more intense. And when you were describing it, it did seem like there was a lot that you were doing for that master's degree. But how did you grapple this? I mean, it must have been beautiful to go to a PhD and the pressure be a little bit less than what you had in your master's. Was the master's good for you? I mean, and I'll ask it in the sense that you could relax on your PhD because you already knew what you needed to do because you had done something similar in your master's.
Yeah, I think that was part of it. First of all, I'm going to touch on your first comment. So I think a lot of this, the way my mom puts it, is that I was born with a star. Somebody is watching over me at all times, and I've been super blessed since the moment I was born, to have the parents I have and to grow up in the town that I grew up and made the friends that I made as a child, and to the people I've met working, even if when they have not been the best people. I told you I had a bad experience in my master's at Purdue. So the professor I came with turned out to be not what anybody expected. Um, I'm not gonna say more, but she's not there anymore, right? But it was tough for me because that meant I needed to figure things out on my own, and even that was great. It was a nightmare when I was there at the time, but looking back, I mean, I got more out of it than I haven't gotten from any good experience, I think, because it forced me to do things on my own and figure things out on my own. And I think you're absolutely right. By the time I got to my PhD, I was so used to it that it was a little easier. It wasn't. I don't think it was more relaxed. I struggled with some of the research because um, back then I was still in the mentality that every trial needs to work and every result has to have a meaning, and everything has to make sense. So I was frustrated a lot because it didn't most of the times, and that I struggled with that a lot, to the point where I didn't want to write my dissertation. In my mind, it didn't have any value for anybody, so why would I do it?
Yeah.
I didn't understand that it was just an exercise for me to learn methods and solving problem skills, and it was just giving me the tools to be able to do a job, that I was getting ready for. But at the time, I was just this results don't make sense. At Purdue, at least my results were made sense. Now they're probably obsolete because they're about DDGs, but they made sense. They I felt like I brought something to society that was useful, right? Something to the industry that would mean something to somebody, and it would help somebody. With my PhD, I did more work, and I felt like I had less that meant something. The nutrition, the post AI nutrition side on the heifers, there's a lot of material still out there that still referenced, and that feels great. But a lot of the embryo work that I did, it was just meaningless at the end. So I think as a PhD student, you need to learn that it's just a process. You're there for the process, not for the results. And what you get the
Yeah.
most of It's just doing the things and not what you publish at the end.
Yeah, yeah, and you know, there is also this feeling though that I have that even though you did the work and it feels like it was meaningless, you never know what's going to happen in some future where somebody might say, "Hey, you've done some embryo work before. Can you help us with this or that?" And you'll know now what not to do.
Right. That's an excellent way to put it. You must be an eternal optimist for what I
Like you, Ricardo, I think, you know, that many of us get disappointed by the brute force that sometimes requires us to succeed after so many failures and failures and failures in lab experiments. And what I'm talking about is, wow, the data didn't, like I thought it was gonna, you know, I had a hypothesis and like, you know, and it's not what I thought, but we need to keep testing, we need to keep refining, we need to keep, and I think that idealism is, that we all take, and the beauty of doing science is definitely something that is a lesson to be learned in terms of the patience and understanding noise and variability in the data and statistics and its use, you know, and so on and so forth. And you know, it does take that type of mentality and optimism that try after try, gel after gel, failure after failure, you know, experiment after experiment, that you got to keep going, because there is that gem that you're going to unpack one day and go, aha, that one experiment, that one result that gives you that joy in keep moving forward.
And more than that, Tommy, I think for me, I never sit down and think back about stuff like this. But now that we're philosophizing here, I think it made me a better professional, you know, because I'm more critical of what I read. You know, I'm more critical of my own work here at United, for example. I'm probably the last one that gets convinced about X or Y result, you know, because I did it and I know I can screw up. So I want to do it over and over and over until I'm absolutely sure that what I'm seeing is real. So it helped me, I think, be a better researcher because, you know, I don't put the I don't put the goal ahead of the results. It's always what the results are. And at least in our industry, you find a lot of companies, a lot of researchers that have an idea in mind, they have a goal in mind, a hypothesis that they're not really trying to refute, they're trying to prove.
Yes.
They drive with that and
Yes.
they accommodate the results to whatever they
Right.
set out to do. And I you know, maybe because of my experience, maybe because of the culture of the company, but I don't find myself in that position, and I love that.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like I don't know, a scientific sincerity. I don't know why you call it, but
It is. Yeah.
it's hard to find anymore.
Yeah. Well, and it's so good to hear you say that, because it is that scientific integrity that makes sure that we keep making progress in the advances that we're making in animal health, human health, environmental health, the restoration, stewardship. I mean, and you're such at a key a critical point of where there's so much intersection of all those worlds that come together. Um, we held I held an interview yesterday with one of the professors in food science, and we were talking a little bit about, you know, that intersection and how we can, with these types of, you know, scientific approaches and technological advances, we will be able to start making better predictions, better models, and start dealing with some of the health aspects of things. But Ricardo, tell us a little bit, what's your day to day? You probably, or, even though you were offered this job, was it just like an offer? Or did you have to interview at United Animal Health? Or was it that, you had a few conversations with a few people and they said, yep, Ricardo is the guy, let's bring him on. How was that process?
I didn't know what to expect. It's being from outside the US, you have a lot of restrictions on what you can do and what you can work on and for how long. So I was not very picky at the beginning. I was like, wherever I find a job, that's where I'll start and we'll see from there. I think I was just that start again. I was lucky enough that end up in a company that where you can make a career. But it started with an interview, and like I said, it was completely different than what I'm doing now. But I was just so excited to have a job and have somebody, be interested in hiring me and giving me a shot, that I didn't really think much about. I didn't really have any options, if I'm being honest with you. You apply and you have your OPT, right? After you graduate from each degree, and that gives you what, 2 years. So you don't really have a lot of room for picking and choosing. Um, but yeah, so you got to make the best of it. And I so right now I already have my green card, so I'm a permanent resident, and I'm not a citizen yet. But um, I thought when I got my green card, I was gonna feel detached, and I was gonna feel a hunger to look for something different. And the total opposite happened to me. So when I got my green card, you have that sense of uncertainty before that, your visa is gonna run out, your work visa is gonna run out, and you know what you're gonna do. There's nothing to go back to, in your home country, in your mind, right? There's always something to go back to. But you don't you don't want to invest money because you don't know where you're gonna end up. You buy a house, but am I gonna have to sell it in 60 days? If this doesn't come through. So all that uncertainty weighs on you.
Yeah.
And when I got my green card, it just made me appreciate my job that much more. I'm here because I want to be here.
Yeah.
I love what I'm doing. There's no reason for me to change. Like, this is where I want to be.
Yeah.
So it gives me a sense of appreciating what I had, and it just made my life a little easier, I think, than thinking about it.
Yeah. What's the favorite thing that you do? What's your day to
So
day like?
my day to day, it's absolutely different every time. Obviously, there's a lot of office time working on the computer, analyzing data and building reports and all that stuff. But just yesterday, I flew in and out of Minneapolis. I went to Minneapolis for a lunch meeting and flew back at night. So that's one day of my week. Um, I've been to in March. I was in four different countries. For some for conferences, some supporting sales, some for scientific meetings. So every year and every month are different have been different in the 8 years that I've been here.
Yeah.
Which is it's it's difficult in a way because you don't get into a routine where you can keep track of everything and be on time for everything. But it also keeps it exciting. You're always expecting what's next, and I don't know. I like it. It works for me. But I can see how it would be too much stress for some other people.
Totally. And I've had this curiosity. What is, when we're talking about specialty products for dairy, what are we talking about here? What are the specialty products? How do they differ from non-specialty products?
So the way I see it, non-specialty product, sorry, will be commodities. You know, anything that you don't really have a specific mode of action or that is unique to you. Oh my God. So like your proteins, you know, are commodity. In a way, your bypass fats are a commodity anymore. Um, so specialty products are small or low um, feeding rate products that have a specific function. So in our case, we focus a lot on probiotics. We're based on bacillus. That means we own a huge library of different strains of and species of bacillus that we do research on. We develop products, we market those products, and we support those products. So we have the whole chain. Um, and that's probably the main driver on the dairy side right now. United, though, it's still 85% swine. So the core of the business is still swine nutrition. You know, the company was founded on swine nutrition, and that's still a big part of the company. But more and more every year, and you can see it year over year, the other divisions are growing. So poultry is growing, the international division is growing, the microbial division is growing. We have an informatics division as well. So the company is branched in different ways that makes sales meetings very interesting.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that you can tie together to collaborate. So yeah, we're always trying to find the next thing, right? So innovation is a big push right now, because historically we haven't had a structured innovation plan. It's always come organically. But now we're putting a lot of emphasis in setting a plan for the next 5 years, next 10 years, the next 15 years. You know, start with a big number of projects or ideas that we can narrow down to the next thing, you know, whenever that happens.
So what are the types of what are the types of positions that you know are coming about in terms of anything from farm to technical to people that work with you? It's because a lot of people that watch or listen to Pathfinder, they are, they could be job seekers, or they could be, grad students, postdocs that are looking to do internships or opportunities that they could, experience, what it's like to work in industry and work in this type of sector.
So we have research associates, research scientists, we have technicians. United owns 5 research farms on the swine side. We have one dairy research farm that's mainly calves that we're expanding right now. But we always get 1 or 2 interns every summer from Purdue most of the time. And right now I'm looking for a tech support person for the dairy side. So we're in the process of finding somebody right now. I think we're close to finding who we want, but the position is still open. Lab technicians, we have our own. Obviously, there's 60 people at MDG, which is the microbial discovery group in Wisconsin. Microbiologists, animal scientists, chemistry people. So there's a lot of variety in terms of the roles that you can find here in United or apply for.
Yeah.
In our website, they do a pretty good job keeping that up to date on the openings. Yeah. And there's always, 3, 4, 5 openings at all times.
And what would you say, what's the best way if people were interested in some of those opportunities? What's the best approach for them to take?
Yeah, just go on the website, find something you like, apply for it. Katie, yes, I'm looking at the last thing. I shouldn't be doing this, but Katie, it's our HR person. She's been with us probably 4 or 5 months, and she's awesome.
Okay.
But she's the one that helps us with finding new people, new talent. and she's on top of things. So if you apply for something, she'll get back to you, within days, and start talking about opportunities and options and interviews and all that. So
Awesome.
yeah,
That's so great. Ricardo, I wanna touch on something that you said, and I think it's very important to really highlight, and that you had also an experience that was not a pleasant experience, but it gave you the tools to trust yourself, trust your ability to move forward. And so we talk a lot in this program about different mentors that people have had and so on. But what would be some of the things that you would say to somebody who maybe has not been able to find a mentor, even though they've tried, even though they've put themselves out there, but maybe they really haven't connected, or they've had a similar situation where somebody who they thought was going to be a good mentor at the end was not the best mentor for them. So what would you say to people that go through that experience?
first of all, Katie Oxford is our person in HR. I'm
Okay.
gonna forgive myself
You
if
knew you'd remember.
but ah, there's a lot of that, more than I thought there was. A lot of it's hard, when you come from a different culture for the first time and you're dealing with somebody that's really good at science. It's very likely that you're gonna find a person that is socially awkward, right?
Mhm.
They may be the smartest in their field, but their people skills are not the best. They may be really good teachers, but I don't know, relationship wise, maybe not. It's really hard to find a professor that has the full package. And there are professors out there, they have it more and more every day. But, you know, um, in my case, it was neither, which it was just a dud. But I think you just gotta, if you are in that situation, you gotta make a decision, right? My decision that I was faced with was either you quit and try again somewhere else, and then just kind of just wasted this time that you tried, that you put so much effort for. And what I thought, it was, I'm at a great university. There's huge resources here. The people are great. I'm not gonna let this one person ruin it for me. So I'm just gonna make the best of it, and I'm gonna put the work in. And she wants a grad student. I'm gonna give her a grad student. But I put my conditions in place, and I was able to get her off my back basically, and do things my way with the support that I needed from these other professors. And I I was mature enough to ask for what I wanted and do things my way. So I would say to people, just be confident. I think confidence is the thing that we lack the most when we're in that position, that we feel that somebody has power over us. And it's not necessarily the case. Just think about what the person has to lose or to win from that relationship with you, and just just make the decision. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to be miserable for a couple of years if I'm gonna get my master's degree from Purdue, for example? For me, it was.
Yeah.
And I wasn't gonna be miserable the whole time, right? It was just my interactions with that person. And but to me, it was worth it. It was tough, like I said, but I have zero regrets. I think if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't change a thing.
That's great, and I thank you so much for saying the words that you've just said, because they are so true. And I hope people are listening to those few sentences, because they are real And they are many times what people don't understand, that it's your thesis, your degree. The person is there to advise you, not to be your boss and tell you what to do, but to provide advice for you to pick and choose your own direction and your own way. Because at the end, it's going to be your story that you write on that thesis or whatever it is, the report or the publication.
That would be my biggest advice for somebody that is found in that situation right now. You have the flexibility to make a move. I was led to believe that I was stuck, and that's why I decided to, stick with it. But there's a lot of professors that don't put the students first. And, in my mind, if you're faculty, your responsibility is first to your students. You are being paid to educate people, to prepare people for their careers. So you are servants of the students. You got to put them first. Yeah. And that's not always the case. So if you don't feel like that people is looking after you first, make the move. It's easy to move to a different department, to a different professor, line everything up, make the move. If that you feel that's the best thing that you can do.
Yeah.
Because I tried, like that was my intention, but I was upfront about it. I try to talk to this person about making the move, and I kind of got blindsided, and I ended up not doing it for fear that I wasn't going to be able to come back to Purdue, because I was led to believe that I had to reapply, if I wanted to change departments, and it was just a huge mess. But you can do it. I mean, people do it all the time, and I didn't realize that until my second semester or my second year at Purdue. But yeah, look for what makes you happy. If you're not happy in the first try, just talk to somebody else. There's always good people in every university that want to work with you, that want to do the best for you. Just like there are people that are just looking out for themselves. But sooner or later, those people don't make it through. It's just when you hire somebody, you don't know, right?
Yeah, that's
so
right.
You got to sort themselves out.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for those words of wisdom, Dr. Ricardo Arias, Manager of Dairy Specialty Products, Technical Services at United Animal Health. Ricardo, what a pleasure to talk to you today. Thanks again for sharing so much and opening so much of yourself and your story to us today so that we can learn. I really appreciate it.
No, appreciate the opportunity. Hopefully it'll help somebody out there that's needing to hear what I had to say, and appreciate the opportunity. Good to talk to you. I'm looking forward to the next time we do it in Spanish.
Absolutely, absolutely. Con muchos saludos.
Gracias, Tommy. Un placer.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Hasta luego.